Welcome back. We're talking about Russia's growing influence across the Middle East. Still with us, Vladimir Golstein is a professor at Brown University. Khaled Dawoud is an Egyptian journalist. And Ali Cinar is with the Turkish Heritage Organization. Vladimir, if we look at the United States' influence in the Middle East, of course, the United States invaded Iraq, and that was a war from which it did not emerge victorious, and is now very reluctant to get involved in any more wars in that region. So I'm going to ask you a question that I asked our reporter at the beginning of the program. Has Russia seen this as an opportunity to expand its influence, to fill this vacuum, this void?
Definitely, but Russia feels probably a more general feeling that the situation is changing in the Middle East. What we have is that, serious players are emerging. We mentioned, of course, Egypt and oil states in Turkey, but, there is Iran, which is a very serious player as well. And these countries are there, and they need to exercise their influence, and they need to sort of find some kind of a solution for everything. And Russia feels that's enough already for United States to dictate things. So now they interfere, now they try to create regime change, now they produce this total lawlessness in the form of Daesh and other sort of strange organizations. So United States is not really sort of either qualified diplomatically or historically, or maybe nobody is qualified to deal with this complicated region. What we have to do is, people have to negotiate now, sit at the tables, and considering, A, the interest of people within the country. So I think it's up to Syrian people to decide whom they want to rule, but they also have to consider the interest of all the, players who are there. And I think, Russia felt that the time is changing, that, what the United States could get away with in the 80s and 90s when China was weak and not particularly assertive, and Russia was, even, 10 times weaker. That was a different situation. Now we have, all different countries, and it's time to sort of negotiate and talk and consider interests of everyone, rather than just, now the Saudi Arabia wants this, or United States want that, and we have to all to play along. So I think Putin is more or less feels that the time is changing, and history is moving in a different direction.
Khaled, when it comes to Egyptian foreign policy, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has been talking about balance. Now, we know that Egypt has been a very close ally of the United States for a very long time, especially since the fall of the Soviet Union. Egypt is still also one of the biggest recipients of aid from the United States. But when the president talks about balance, what explains this outreach to Russia?
Well, of course, as you know, after the removal and the Egyptian army's interference to remove former Muslim Brotherhood President Mohammed Morsi, the Obama administration did not think positively at all of that development, and actually described it as a military coup. And for a certain period of time, the Obama administration decided to suspend the military assistance that it used to provide to Egypt on an annual basis since the signing of the peace agreement with Israel in 1979. So in this particular difficult time for President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, when he didn't have a lot of international recognition or willingness to cooperate with him because of the removal of Mohammed Morsi after popular demonstrations on June 30, 2013, probably President Sisi thought of Russia and President Putin as the only available alternative to try to compensate for some of Egypt's needs, even though we've always had strong relations with Russia. I mean, not in terms of arms purchases necessarily over the past 15 or 20 years, but in terms of importing wheat, Russian tourists who come to Egypt or used to come to Egypt before the Russian plane incident the tragic accident of the Russian plane. We used to have at least 3 million Russians who come to Egypt. But nevertheless, after the removal of Morsi and Mr. Sisi becoming president, I guess President Sisi looked very much at President Putin as a possible ally while facing the sort of unwelcoming United States and European nations. And I guess President Putin, to a large extent, responded to those wishes of President Sisi. He received him at least twice in Moscow. They met a few times in other international gatherings. But of course, as I said before, Russia is not the former Soviet Union, and when sort of differences happen between Egypt and Russia over the Russian aeroplane, for example, Russia takes a very hard-line stand and demands many changes in the Egyptian security system at airports. And until now, 1 year later, we have not seen the Russian tourists back. There are some important contracts that have been signed, such as Russia building 4 small electricity nuclear reactors in Dab'a for $25 billion. So Mr. Sisi is trying to balance the lack of cooperation with the United States at this stage by strengthening ties with Russia.
Right. Ali, the Turkish government was very critical of the United States in the wake of that failed coup back in July. Turkey said that the United States was giving sanctuary to one of the coup leaders, even accused the United States in some instances of being behind the coup. How much of a turning point was that for relations between Turkey and the United States on the one hand, and on the other, was that one of the reasons why Turkey decided it has to improve relations with Russia?
Well, I don't think so. I mean, before July 15th, we see the communication between President Erdogan and Putin before July 15th. So I don't think because of the July 15th, Turkey is trying to get closer to Russia or Russia is trying to get closer to Turkey. But yes, there's a problem right now with the United States, especially asking FETÖ leader Fethullah Gülen to send back to Turkey. And if this continues, then next year we'll see big problem, the relationship between Turkey and United States.
Do you think that relationship will deteriorate even further?
I think so, because Turkey recognizes right now FETÖ leader Fethullah Gülen as a terrorist organization, and Turkey is saying that if FETÖ is a terrorist organization, you should, send him back to Turkey, and we'll take care of him, and he's going to go to the court. And why Turkey is insisting? Because United States and Turkey are allies over 50 years. So if Turkey is asking a suspect or terrorist organization leader, he should be sent back. And as I said, this will be a big problem if they don't solve the problem.
Vladimir, you talked a moment ago about Russia's relationship with Iran. In fact, Russia has used one of your bases, the Noje military base. When you look at their relationship, Policy magazine here in the United States says that an expanded Russian military role in Iran would give Moscow the capability to project power in ways never before seen in the Persian Gulf. How important is that for Russia? What are the strategic consequences of that?
Well, first of all, it will be certain historical restoring historical ties with Iran, because Russia was traditionally an ally with Iran in Middle East throughout 19th century. There were always tensions, so-called sort of great game when England wanted their own things. They wanted to make sure that nobody gets close to India, and Russia had their own allies. So it will be like a certain restoration. And it's very important for Russia, to be in this area. So I think it sort of makes sense. So what should be stressed that the United States spends a lot of money and a lot of effort and a lot of military personnel, but I think they shouldn't presume that money buys everything. The situation there is much more complex. So these alliances will be occurring and reoccurring. For example, United States might be an ally with Turkey, but Turkey is not very happy with the fact that the United States supports Kurds in their fight in Syria. Turks are very allergic to Kurdish presence. So this is a very complicated region. And what we see is emerging is various alliances, various complexities, various multipolar deals. And I think this is a new reality. So, the sooner the rest of the players, NATO countries and the United States, realize the situation change, the better for everyone. And I think that's the reason why Russia wants to have ties with Iran and assert their military presence, so other countries wouldn't entertain any ideas that they can still dictate and solve things by brutal military power.